Hi, we're back. Sorry, I guess there was a little copyright issue with the video that we just showed. Incredible, right? I just showed Incredibles last week and they didn't flag us for anything, so I did a great job with violating the YouTube rights, I guess. I apologize. But I'm going to go ahead and start with where we were. I guess I didn't even get to starting the lesson, but I'll go ahead and start right now. But what I wanted to go ahead and do is go ahead and give you a little peek into my family growing up. I'm the second oldest of 4 kids, and I have an older brother named Tim, and I have 2 younger sisters named Lindsay and Anna. Now, my parents are awesome. I've loved them my entire life. They're amazing parents. My siblings are awesome. I love my family. And for the most part, growing up, I got along with them quite well. Now, there were times, however, where I didn't get along with them all that much. My brother and I probably got along the best, but my sisters and I, we had some spats. Now, while I can't reference a specific argument or a disagreement with them, what I can do is remember many occasions where I would end up being annoyed with my sisters when it came to bedtime. See, my sisters were not really good at going to bed when I wanted them to or when our parents wanted them to. They would stay up late bickering like crazy, and often what would happen is I would march down the hallway, I would pound on their door and basically scream at them to tell them to shut up. And oftentimes I would get away with it. Sometimes my parents would get me in trouble and I would have issues with that. But for the most part, with me loving my sleep and my sisters not really caring, I did have some moments where that was the case, where I would get in a fight with my siblings. Now, my family wasn't and isn't perfect. That's no mystery. But I think right now, what I could say is we get along a lot better now than we ever did, but that doesn't mean that we don't have our spats and disagreements right now. We do. But I can tell you this, no matter what type of fights we get into or disagreements we get into, we love each other. We care for one another and want to see each other succeed. Now, are we a normal family? Are we a typical family? Those are questions that probably come up. Now, when it comes to families, I would have to ask, who says what typical is? Sometimes we let others' definitions or views of what's normal shape our views of our own families. Like we said last week, no matter what kind of family you have, no family is typical. We are all abnormal. We are all different in our own ways. Your family is already atypical, abnormal, different. But what if God is calling your family to be even more atypical than it already is, to be even more abnormal than it already is? Like we said last week, there is no family too simple or too complex for God to use. Your family can be used by God to do incredible things. But how? See, at some point, every family does experience difficulty or conflict. You might be experiencing one of those situations right now. Typical families might try to handle those situations on their own and try and have it be on their own agendas. But an atypical family knows that they can't handle these situations on their own and they need to ask for help, specifically God's help. So last week we met the family of Adam and Eve, the world's very first family. And we saw how their story went from being very wrong as a result of the choices to disobey God and hurt each other. But because God is a God of grace, God used their family to do something incredible, to one day bring Jesus to the world. Now today, I want to introduce you to another family. This family lived many generations after Adam and Eve, and they were atypical in their own ways. You may have heard about Abraham before. We've actually brought his name up before on our Sunday morning Bible studies through the thread. But we're going to talk about a little bit more about his story here. Not just Abraham and Sarah, but we're going to bring up his situation with his nephew, Lot. So what I want to go ahead and do is open up to Genesis chapter 13, verses 1 through 13. Okay, and we're going to be there just for the beginning of our duration here. So Genesis 13, 1 through 13. I'll go ahead and allow you to turn there real quick. But what I want to go ahead and do is learn a little bit more about Abraham's life that we hadn't covered just yet. All right? I'm going to assume that you probably are already there. If you're not, go ahead and follow along with me. It says this. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev with his wife and everything he had, and Lot went with him. Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and silver and gold. From the Negev, he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier, and where he had first built an altar. There, Abram called out on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Abram's herdsmen and herdsmen of Lot. The Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. So Abram said to Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. Lot looked up and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt toward Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted company. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. Now, as you can see, Abraham and Lot were like many of our families today. They fought a lot. And we see here that both Abraham and Lot were both wealthy. And because of that, the land that they owned was not able to support them both. So there was a lot of animosity between him and Lot, and the herdsmen of Lot and the herdsmen of Abraham. So they decided that it was in their best interests to go ahead and separate ways and go their separate ways. So Abraham and Lot moved to completely different cities. Lot chose to go to the Jordan Valley, and Abram settled in Canaan. Yes, that's the land that God promised to the Israelites, to Abraham. All right? And Lot was in the Jordan Valley and went as far as Sodom. Now, if you aren't familiar with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, that's kind of where this comes into place. Sodom is a very evil city, and Lot is going in that direction. Now, we'll get back to Lot in just a second. But let me tell you a little bit more about Abraham so you can understand just how atypical and different his family really was. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 18, verses 1 through 15. All right? And I want you to go ahead and read along with me. This is only 5 chapters over. All right? It says this. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, "If I found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat, so you can be refreshed, and then go on your way. Now that you have come to your servant." "Very well," they answered, "do as you said." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he said, "get 3 seahs of fine flour and knead it and bake some bread." Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice, tender calf and gave it to a servant, who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. "Where is your wife Sarah?" they asked him. "There in the tent," he said. Then the Lord said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already old and well advanced in years, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "After I am worn out and my master is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I'm old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, "I did not laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did laugh." All right, so Abraham and Sarah are really old, and they didn't have any kids yet, but they were visited by messengers from God who told them that Sarah was going to have a baby. Okay, so just imagine for a second your grandma telling you that God sent her messengers to say that she was going to have a baby. You'd probably be a little bit more concerned about your grandma's mental health right there. And that's how atypical Abraham's family was. Sarah was in denial about even having kids, and also she was a little frightened by what had just happened. Okay, so we see how atypical Abraham's family is, how different it is. Okay, so now we go back to Abraham and Lot. We're going to go ahead and continue from verses 16 through 33 in chapter 18. I understand we're reading a lot. There's a lot to this story. So here's where we pick up in verse 16. When the men got up to leave, They looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Abraham will surely become a great, powerful nation, and all the nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." Then the Lord said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous that I will go down and see if what they had done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." The men turned away and went towards Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do right?" The Lord said, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Then Abraham spoke up again, "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city because of the 5 people? If I find 45 there," God said, "I will not destroy it." Once again he spoke to him, "What if only 40 are found there?" He said, "For the sake of 40, I will not do it." Then he said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found there?" He answered, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." Abraham said, "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, what if only 20 can be found there?" He said, "For the sake of 20, I will not destroy it." Then he said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found there?" He answered, "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned home. All right, so as we go to chapter 19, verses 27 through 29, we see that basically the city of Sodom is destroyed. And guess who is saved? Lot and his family, all except his wife, who ended up looking back and turning into a pillar of salt. Okay, so the point here is this. Abraham saw what was going on in the city of Sodom. He saw that there was destruction that was about to happen. And even though Abraham and Lot had a long history of disagreements, remember that they fought so much that they had to move to different cities, all right? Abraham saw that Lot was in trouble, and he pleaded for God to save Lot and his family. And in response to that, God answers his prayer and saves Lot. This is actually a really insightful little conversation between Abraham and God, because Abraham is pleading to God, "Hey, if you find 50 people, if I find 50 people in the city of Sodom, will you spare those righteous people?" And God said, "Yes." And yes, it keeps on going down to 45 to 40 to 30 to 20 to 10. But the point is, essentially, Abraham is trying to figure out, will God spare his nephew Lot and his family? Is that going to be a possibility? So we see God answering the prayer of Abraham to save Lot. Now, last week we said that if you want God to use your family to do atypical things, sometimes you have to be the first person in your family to do something atypical. And that's what Abraham did. When you're fighting with somebody in your family, it isn't typical to do what Abraham did. See, the typical response is to fight back, or hold a grudge, or give the silent treatment. But what Abraham chose to do is the atypical thing. He prayed for Lot in the middle of their conflict. He didn't wait for an apology. He reached out first through prayer. Now, this might seem so simple, but it's so atypical. Not so typical families pray for each other. And when it comes to my family, though we disagree, that didn't stop us from praying for one another. We don't live very close together anymore, okay? My parents live in Mississippi. My brother lives in St. Louis. My sister lives in St. Louis, and I have a sister that lives in Vegas as well. And though we aren't in the same place, we are still trying to connect with one another all the time. And though we disagree, we still try and build each other up, encourage each other, and pray for one another, because that's what we're called to do as a family. So just like Abraham saw change in his family for the better, and I saw change just like change in my family for the better, prayer can change your family for the better as well. Every family has imperfections, problems, and struggles, but atypical families invite God into these situations through prayer. Prayer doesn't really have to be that complicated. It could be as simple as thanking God for your family, even if you're not sure you mean it at the time. It could mean asking God to give you faith, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control, the fruit of the Spirit. It can be as simple as asking God to give you wisdom to resolve your disagreement. It can be as simple as asking God to do the same for the family member that you're disagreeing with, or even thanking God for helping your family through rough situations. Now think about right now a recent disagreement you had with a family member or a disagreement you seem to have often. Now imagine that conflict could be transformed if you stop to pray instead of fight with them. How do you think prayer could change your attitude or temper or perspective? How do you think prayer could change the person that you're fighting with? How do you think prayer could begin to change your family's pattern of behavior in the long term? It's interesting, really, to think that Abraham chose to pray for Lot before he ever reconciled with Lot. And in the middle of their conflict, Abraham went first by choosing to pray for Lot instead of continuing to fight with him. So this week, what if you decided to go first? What I want you to do real quick is in between this YouTube live session and our Zoom discussion, I want you to think about a family member that you can pray for this week, and then write it down. And put this by your bed or anywhere next to you, that's somewhere where you're going to see it every day, and commit to praying for that person for this entire week. And it could be your entire family. If you can't think of it now, we can think of it in the Zoom discussion. We can talk about that a little bit too. But I'm challenging you to make prayer a part of your life, to pray for your family, to be there for your family, to build up and encourage your family rather than attacking, belittling, and arguing with them. It can go a long way. If you commit to praying for your family more than you fight with them, imagine how God might be able to use your family to do atypical things in this world. So I'm going to go ahead and lead us in a word of prayer real quick, and I'll have one quick announcement, and we'll go ahead and jump onto our Zoom discussion, all right? So let me go ahead and pray real quick. God, you are beyond us, and you are incredibly powerful and sovereign and good, merciful, gracious. All of these qualities are a part of you, and we aren't any of them. Without you, we're nothing. And we are so grateful that you have given us not just life, but the opportunity for eternal life and the opportunity to be with you forever and eternity. We are thankful for your Son dying on a cross for us, and we're thankful for the families that you've given us. I ask that as we're ending our time tonight, that as these students are listening and praying with me here to you, that we were all joined together and allow this to be an opportunity for us to pray for our families, for us to lift up our families and encourage our families, because without that, change is not going to happen. Prayer needs to be an important aspect of our lives, not just with, everyday life stuff, but just our families. In your precious and holy name, we pray. Amen. All right, real quick, I'm going to go ahead and give you a real quick announcement, and then we'll go ahead and discuss going into Zoom real quick. But as we talked about earlier, what George and I discussed before the, copyright issue, if you saw that, we are holding off on being here at the Green Room until June, okay? And basically, we're just trying to keep you guys safe at home, you and your family safe at home. So just keep that in mind. We're going to keep on being online through YouTube Live and Zoom and doing all those things until the month of June. We would love to have you continue to join us on those avenues. Also, Monday, May 11th, I mentioned this already, but I'm going to mention it again. That's this coming Monday, the day after Mother's Day. We're going to go ahead and have a Zoom game night from 6 to 7:30. It'll be an opportunity for you to relax and enjoy some community community and enjoy some time together, and we can just play some games and have fun. That's happening this Monday, all right? So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and go to our Zoom call. The ID is 642-567-9822. The password is FBC Nevada. We'd love to see you guys join us there. We're going to play a little game, and we'll kind of have some discussion. So we'll see you guys there. Bye.